Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kayla Hepworth, and I'm part of the engagement team here at BCFSA. Welcome to today's webinar, which is an information session for managing and associate brokers about the 2026 data call. We encouraged managing brokers to invite their office staff to attend. After all, they're often the people who end up filling out the workbooks. So we extend a warm welcome to any brokerage staff who may be joining us today. I hope that everyone finds today's session informative and that what you hear today supports your brokerage to participate in this year's data call. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Today's session will run about 45 minutes. If you would like to use closed captioning during this session, you can do so by clicking the Show Captions button on your toolbar at the bottom of the screen. We'll be posting website links in the chat during today's session. Make sure to save them for future use. They will direct you to web pages where you can find additional information on the data call, the workbooks, and how to troubleshoot. We welcome you to use the chat to send a question or note to the panelists. Only panelists will be able to see these messages. Please note, we won't be answering live questions during today's session, but we will be creating a frequently asked questions document from the questions sent through the chat. Speaking of questions, if you ever have any questions related to this year's data call, please reach out to BCFSA's Service Center. They have a dedicated email address for this data call, which is datacall@bcfsa.ca. If you didn't catch that email, no need to worry. We'll be repeating the contact information for the Service Center throughout this session. Finally, we will be recording today's session and it will be available on our website very soon. Next slide, please. As a reflection of the provincial scope of our organization, we recognize that BCFSA and all of its regulated entities occupy territories of nations across British Columbia. We honor and respect the knowledge keepers and are committed to strengthening our relationship with Indigenous peoples. While we meet today on a virtual platform in different locations, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the traditional territory you are calling from. I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. First, we'll hear from Emily Shaw, BCFSA's Manager of Policy for Real Estate. Then Anu Sharma, Senior Policy Analyst here at BCFSA. And then Chris Heald, BCFSA's Manager of Regulatory Solutions. Thank you. And with that, I'll now hand you over to our first speaker, Emily.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for making time in your day to join us. My name is Emily Shaw. I'm the manager of the real estate policy team at BCFSA, and I wanted to thank everyone for your interest in our work. I hope you get good value out of today's session. I'd like to quickly preview what we'll be covering today. To start, I will go over the purpose and parameters of the data call at a high level. Then my colleague Anu will review where to find the reporting workbooks and how to fill them out. My colleague Chris will then provide a demonstration on how to use Iris to submit the completed workbooks. And then we will conclude with some frequently asked questions about the 2026 data call. During the webinar, if you have questions about the data call, you can submit those using the chat function at the bottom of the screen. We will not be taking live questions today, but we will use any live questions we receive to inform our online FAQs and other communications about the data call. Let's get started. Today's presentation provides a technical briefing on the content and process for the 2026 real estate brokerage data call. I'd like to start by extending my sincere thanks to managing brokers for the time and effort that you spend each year collecting and submitting the data. As I'll explain, the data is very valuable to our organization, and we do appreciate your efforts. During today's session, we will provide an overview of the content that you're required to report this year, as well as take a detailed look at how to submit the information to us. Next slide. BCFSA has issued an advisory on the 2026 data call to managing and associate brokers. Today, we're going to review the details of the data call and hopefully answer your questions about how to participate. We're hoping that this year will be smooth sailing, given that this is becoming an established process. However, there's always issues or problems that can crop up with any initiative, so hopefully we'll be able to head off some of those potential problems with the information provided today. As in past years, this year we will again be collecting information from trading services brokerages about residential real estate sales and use of the home buyer rescission period. Data calls are an important piece of BCFSA's regulatory work as they help us gather information about the real estate services being provided in the province, market metrics, and brokerage activities, which we use to make evidence-informed policy decisions. The data call also helps us understand the real estate market, helps us track trends over time, and evaluate and monitor the impact of policy or economic changes on the provision of real estate services. It also assists us with the planning and development of our educational courses and informs our analysis of potential regulatory changes. Next slide. Let's get into the details. As set out in the advisory, the data call applies to all trading services brokerages. Service requests are issued based on the service categories on the brokerages and managing brokers license. So that means that if you are licensed for trading services, you will receive a service request. And this applies even if you do not ever use that trading category and only provide, for example, rental property management services. We receive questions about this every year, so I wanted to address it off the top. As in past years, we're collecting data on the use of the home buyer rescission period, specifically all rescissions that occurred in the 2025 calendar year. We are also continuing to collect data on residential real property sales, where the brokerage provided services to the seller, and taking place between February 15th, 2026 and March 14th, 2026. All submissions with data are to be reported using our Excel workbook and are due via IRIS on April 17th, 2026. Next slide. Even though the substance of the 2026 data call is similar to past years, there are some important changes to be aware of. The first change this year is an exemption from reporting residential transaction data for brokerages that are members of the Greater Vancouver Realtors Board. BCFSA and GVR have entered into an information sharing partnership. You can find more information about the partnership on our website. As part of that partnership, brokerages that are members of GVR and their managing brokers are exempt from providing residential real estate transaction data for transactions involving property located within the geographic areas served by GVR. BCFSA will obtain relevant transaction data directly from GVR. Note that the GVR exemption applies to transaction data only. GVR member brokerages are still required to report rescission data. The second change is that this year we're collecting high-level information on commissions. Specifically, there are 3 new fields included in this year's data call: gross commission, listing brokerage commission, and the buyer's brokerage commission. The workbook contains a page with definitions for each field and gives more detail about where to find the commission amounts and how to fill them out. These new fields will help BCFSA establish a baseline understanding of commission structures in BC. Next slide. Before we move on to talk in greater detail about the workbook, here's a recap of some of the key dates for this year's brokerage data call. In mid-February, BCFSA will issue 2 service requests in IRIS to all brokerages licensed for trading services. That's 1 service request for home buyer rescission period data and 1 for residential transaction data. Brokerages will need to compile information about residential real property sales between February 15th to March 14th. They will also need to compile information about use of the home buyer rescission period in the 2025 calendar year. The service requests are due by April 17th, 2026. This means that brokerages need to respond to the service requests in IRIS on or before this date. Compared to 2025, we have provided additional time this year for managing brokers to respond to the service requests. Please make sure that you are available to submit your response on time, as we cannot provide extensions. The 2026 data call is mandatory for all trading services brokerages. Failure to respond to the 2026 data call may result in the issuance of administrative penalties to the brokerage and its managing broker. Once the data has been collected, BCFSA will undertake our analysis of the submissions in the spring, and as in previous years, we will share a report outlining our observations about the data, likely in early summer. Next slide. That's all for me. My colleague Anu is now going to take you through the details of the workbook.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that great overview of the data call. Hello, everyone. My name is Anu Sharma, and I am a Senior Policy Analyst on the Real Estate Policy team here at BCFSA. Over the next set of slides, I will be going through the workbook. I'll show you where you can find it and how you can fill it out. And then I'll also highlight some tips and tricks and answer some common questions along the way. Next slide, please, Helena. As Emily mentioned, we'll be using Excel workbooks again this year to collect the data. So just like last year, we're collecting two types of information. We're looking at residential real estate sales data, and we're looking at the use of the home buyer's rescission period, HBRP rescission data. That means you'll receive two separate workbooks and two separate service requests through IRIS, one for transaction data and one for the rescission data. The real estate transaction workbook is almost identical to last year's with the addition of the three new commission fields Emily noted earlier. The HBRP workbook is also very similar to last year's version. Both workbooks are available on our website, and as Kayla noted, the links are now posted in the chat for your ease of reference. Chris will speak to this in more detail, but the workbook on our website and the one that you'll receive through IRIS are exactly the same. We're simply providing both options for convenience of downloading. Next slide, please, Helena. So what you see here is a screenshot of the 2026 Real Estate Brokerage Data Call website. You can access this page by searching on our website or open the link in the chat. This website was also included in brokers' briefs and other communications to you about the 2026 data call. On this page, you'll find detailed instructions on how to complete and submit the workbooks. If you haven't already, I really encourage you to read through this information so that you're familiar with the data call process. There's also a step-by-step guide available on the website with screenshots and detailed instructions, and we've linked it in the chat as well for your convenience. If you still have questions after today's webinar, this guide is a great first place to start. Both workbooks, the transaction and HBRP workbook, can be accessed from this instructions page as well as through IRIS. The red arrows on the slide show exactly where you can find the instructions page and then the workbooks on that page. Last year, a few managing brokers asked whether they could complete the data call on their cell phones. It's not something that we'd recommend because entering all data and meeting the formatting requirements can be challenging on a cell phone, but if you really wanted to, it is still possible. You will need to download the workbooks on your phone and make sure that you have an Excel app that allows you to save in .xlsx format. Next slide, please, Helena. Once you've downloaded the workbooks, open them in Excel. While the file opens, you may note that there is a yellow box on the top that may note Enable Editing in the top right before you can enter any data. If this does show up, please enable editing. This slide here shows the cover page of the transaction workbook. Here you can see a screenshot of what that cover page of the workbook looks like. This is for the transaction data workbook, but the process and everything that I'm about to go through and discuss in the next little bit is exactly the same for rescission's workbook as well. So we won't be going over both workbooks, just one, so you can kind of get a hang of it. Each workbook has 4 tabs. So we have a cover page tab, an instructions tab, a definitions tab, and a workbook tab. The names are fairly self-explanatory, but I do want to draw your attention to the definitions tab. The definitions tab includes detailed explanations of what each field means. Last year, we received quite a few questions about how to interpret certain fields, so this is a great place to look and check to see if you're unsure. If you open the workbook and don't see these tabs, you simply just see those 3 dots that the screen is pointing to here, this arrow. This means that the tabs are collapsed. Click the 3 dots on the small arrow to expand them, and the tabs will appear. When you're ready to start entering your data, open the Workbook tab. Next slide, please. Here we have a screenshot of the workbook. The top rows contain the titles of all the data fields we're asking for, and each row represents a separate transaction or rescission. A few important elements to highlight as you complete the workbook. When you click on any field, a yellow box will appear with a high-level overview of what we're looking for, including formatting requirements where they're applicable. Please pay close attention to formatting, especially for dates and numbers. As with last year, we've built in front-end data validation to help ensure entries follow the correct format. If the data doesn't meet the required format, it will be rejected upon submission and you'll need to correct and resubmit. Chris will speak to this a little bit more shortly. You'll also notice a few pre-populated drop-down lists, so you don't have to type everything manually. For example, for municipality, you can type the first few letters and the list will then filter automatically. Don't forget to scroll to the right. In previous years, some managing brokers missed fields simply because they didn't end up scrolling all the way to the end. So just make sure that you do scroll through the workbook. Now, some of you may be wondering what happens if you don't have any transactions or rescissions to report. Similar to last year, if you have no transactions or rescissions, you do not need to complete a workbook. You do still need to report this in IRIS using the No Transactions to Report option in the dropdown. Chris will walk you through exactly how to do this in the next section. Next slide, please. This is an example of Excel's data validation. So in this case, I entered a firm contract date that falls outside of the date range. So what I put in was January 10th, 2025. And Excel immediately flagged it with an error message. And that's because we're only looking for transactions that were completed between February 15th, 2026 and March 14th, 2026. This message explains what formatting we're looking for and what's incorrect. I strongly recommend entering your data manually rather than copying and pasting. When you copy and paste, Excel often overwrites our formatting rules and data validation checks. That means Excel may allow entries that don't meet the criteria, and your file could be rejected when you submit it through IRIS. It's much easier to catch errors at this stage while you're entering the data. Next slide, please. That was a general overview of the workbook. Now I'd like to talk to you about what needs to be reported. For the transaction data, what we're asking brokerages to report is all sales of residential property with a firm contract date between February 15th, 2026 and March 14th, 2026, where the brokerage provided services to the seller, so the listing brokerage only. To break it down, you only need to report transactions that meet all of the following three criteria. Your brokerage was 1, the listing brokerage, 2, the sale was for a residential property, and 3, the firm contract date falls between February 15th and March 14th, 2026. You do not need to report transactions where your brokerage was working with the buyer, the contract falls outside the data call period, or the transaction is commercial. Also, as noted earlier, this year, members of the GVR board and their managing brokers are exempt from providing residential real estate transaction data for transactions involving property located within the GVR's board's geographical area. GVR members will still need to report transactions for properties outside of that GVR board area, and also GVR members are still required to submit rescission data. Next slide, please. For rescission data, we are asking brokerages to report rescissions of a contract of purchase and sale of residential real estate property under the home buyer's rescission period in 2025, where they were the listing brokerage. Only report rescissions where your brokerage was the listing brokerage and the rescission notice was dated between January 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2025. You do not need to report rescissions where your brokerage was working with the buyer and any rescission notices dated before January 2025 or after December 31st, 2025. Next slide, please. A question we get asked a lot last year was, what does residential property include? This is on our website and in the workbook information, but for the purposes of the data call, residential property refers to existing and newly built dwellings, including detached houses, semi-detached houses, for example, duplexes, townhouses, apartments with a duplex or multi-unit dwelling, residential strata lots, so condos, manufactured homes that are affixed to land, and a cooperative interest that includes a right of use or occupation of a dwelling. This does not include property that is on leasehold land or the sale of property where the Real Estate Development and Marketing Act applies, for example, pre-sales. If you're still unsure if your specific example or transaction needs to be reported, you can contact the Service Center and we will provide you with the email address and their contact information in the next slide. Next slide, please. A few other key points I wanted to highlight. We received a lot of questions last year about branch offices. So managing brokers are responsible for submitting transaction information for all corresponding branch offices. All branch data must be included in the head office submission in one single workbook. Branches should work with their brokerage to ensure there is one consolidated submission. We also recommend completing the workbook in real time as transactions complete. Last year, some brokerages waited until the end of the data call period to enter information, and they ran into challenges of tracking down deal files. It's much easier to enter the information as you go rather than retroactively. A reminder about manual entry, we do not recommend copying and pasting. As I mentioned before, copying and pasting can override the formatting and data validation that we've built in, which may cause issues when you submit. Paying attention to formatting on the front end will help you catch errors early. If you have any questions or are unsure about something while preparing the workbook, take a look at the instructions on our website or the instructions tab within the workbook. There's lots of detail in there, so it's a great first resource. If you still have questions, please feel free to reach out to our service center. They're ready to help and will direct any questions to practice standards advisors, the policy team, or IT as needed. You can contact the service center by emailing them at datacall@bcfsa.ca, or you can call them at either their toll-free number or 604-660-3555. And now I'll hand things over to Chris, who will walk through an IRIS demonstration on how to submit your data call submission. Over to you, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Anu. Hi, everybody. Can we jump over to the next slide? All right. So take note, these are screen captures to ensure smoothness of the demonstration. It's always better to do this in screen captures than in a live system. And also note that because the data call isn't live yet, most of these screen captures and images were taken from a pre-production system. So you will probably see some minor changes between what you see here and the final version. Okay, so when the data call is open and ready, you'll receive 2 emails from BCFSA that look like this. The emails will have a direct link to the data call service request. Please use the email address shown in the message to sign in. This is really important. This is how the portal links you up to your brokerage's information. If you've never used the IRIS portal before, which is unlikely but possible, please use this email address to sign up. Otherwise, we'll have no way to know you are you, and you will not be able to see the data call service request. If you do need to change your email address or want to change it, please contact BCFSA beforehand to make this change. The email will also contain links with help for signing in and signing up in the portal. Next slide, please. After you've signed into the IRIS portal, depending on which link you followed from the email, you'll either land directly in the service request or you'll be taken to the portal homepage. To get to the data call for the portal from the portal homepage, go to your organization dashboard because the data calls are pertinent to a brokerage, which is an organization, and then click on your brokerage's name. You will probably see one brokerage, but if you are responsible for a branch office, you might see that too. So do go to the brokerage name first. There should be at least one outstanding submission next to the organization and more likely 2, one for the data call and one for the rescission. Next slide, please. In your organization dashboard, you'll see the brokerage data call 2026 service requests. Their status will be shown as draft, which means they haven't been submitted yet. Note that the due date here shown is for demonstration purposes only. Click on the service request number to go to that data call. That's in the ID column. Next slide, please. Each service request will land you on an introduction step. This is an example of the introduction step of the data call, and it'll show a summary of the steps to take and what data to report. There'll be a link in the description and this introduction step to the template that you will need to download and complete if you haven't downloaded it already. like we said previously, this link takes you to the same template and same link on the BCFSA website as in the notifications you got. So this won't be any different. There's no different template here. It all points to the same thing. After downloading the template, add in the requested information as shown earlier. To start the data call, click on the Start button. The button will quickly change to Processing. Next slide, please. Now, if you have no transaction data report, you do not have to complete and submit the Excel template. If you're sure you have no transactions to report, check the box next to check here if you have no transactions to report. Doing this will skip the file upload and validation step. Clicking on Next will submit your data call and close it out. Now, this specific screen applies to brokerages that are not within the GVR. There is a different process for GVR, which we'll step into next. Next slide, please. So for GVR member brokerages, there is a slightly different set of options for you. If your brokerage is a member of the GVR board, you will see this screen, and this is the additional option. If your brokerage is a member of GVR and you have no data to report, you, again, like the other brokerages, you do not have to complete and submit the Excel template. If you are sure you have no transactions to report, check the box next to check here if you have no transactions to report. But for GVR members, you will also need to select the option that describes why you have no data to report. So for example, in this case, you're indicating that you have no transactions. In this case, this will skip the file upload and validation step. Again, clicking on Next will skip the Excel template upload and will submit your data call. Next slide, please. Again, this screen is only visible if your brokerage is a member of the GVR board. If you're sure that all of your transactions are in the exempted region, select the checkbox like you did before, and then choose all of my transactions are in the exempted region. Again, in this case, you will not have to complete and submit the Excel template. Again, this will skip the file upload and validation step, and clicking on Next will submit your data call. This additional step is important because you may have transactions that would be outside of the GVR region that you would still need to report. So in that rare set of circumstances, you do need to report them and you will need to complete an Excel sheet. Next slide, please. So let's presume you have transactions to report. This is what a completed template for a brokerage that has transactions to report will look like. Again, do know that there's results that scroll off to the right, but this is typically what it would look like. The workbook has one transaction per line. So in this case, the sample template is ready to be submitted. Next slide, please. So again, if you have transactions to report, click on Choose File to select your completed template file. This will open up a file browser that lets you pick the file on your local computer to attach. Next step, please. After you've chosen your file, click on Next to submit the file for validation. The validation process will check your file for any errors and inconsistencies. Next slide, please. Validation can take up to 10 minutes to complete. It's often faster, but during busy times, it can take a bit longer. During validation, this message will be displayed. You can safely leave this page and come back later. If validation is not complete, you'll be taken back to this page. You can leave at any time. The best way to know that your validation is complete is by receiving an email that lets you know that the validation is complete. When validation is complete, you will receive one of two emails. If no errors were found, your template will be considered submitted and final. It will be a confirmation email. If errors were found, you will receive an email asking you to return to the portal to review the results of the validation and to correct any errors that were found. Take a note that sometimes this page does take a bit longer to update. If you return to this page and still see the processing file message, please wait a few more minutes and try again. Next slide, please. This is what a message would look like if there were errors found in the validation process. Follow the link to return to the portal and review the validation messages. Just know that the validation results are only visible in the portal. Since this information could potentially be sensitive, it's not included in the email. Remember, your submission is not complete until you've corrected the errors and resubmitted the file. Next step, please. This is what validation results would look like if there were errors found. So for example, in this case, the spreadsheet did not follow the template format that was uploaded. It lists each and every cell and what it expected and what it found instead. Again, remember your submission is not complete until you've corrected the errors and submitted the file again. Read over the warnings and error messages and make any required corrections in your template. After making the corrections, click on Choose File to select your corrected file, and then click on Next to submit the corrected file for validation. And the validation process will repeat. If there are no validation errors, this is the email you'll receive. Your data call submission is now complete and filed. You are now done. This marks that you've completed and fully fulfilled the submission for this. You'll need to go through this process twice, once for the data call and once for the precision data. You can now return to Iris Portal and verify the status of your submission. Next slide, please. In the portal on your organization dashboard, this shows that the successfully submitted data call service request status has changed to filed. You can see more details by clicking on the service request ID. Next slide, please. These are the details of the successful data call service request. Take note that once submitted, the file and data that you submitted will not be visible in the portal. This just shows that you've submitted it and when, and that it was successful. At this point, you are now done for this portion of the data call submission. Thank you. I'm now going to turn the presentation back.
Thank you so much, Chris. So now what we'll do is we'll go through some frequently asked questions. These are some questions that have been compiled based on common queries we received, and we'll run through them over the next few slides. If you have any additional data call related questions, remember to put them in the chat and we will respond to them in an FAQ document, which will be posted to the website shortly.
Okay, so thanks, Anu. Let's start at the beginning. Can you remind us, why is BCFSA conducting a data call?
Great. Next slide, please. Great question, Emily. BCFSA collects this data to support its effective and proactive oversight of the real estate services sector. This data helps us fulfill our mandate by identifying risks consumers may be facing, assisting in evidence-based policy and oversight, and assessing market practices and the impact of policy changes.
Great. And again, can you refresh everyone's memory? What data is being collected through this year's data call?
Of course. This year, just like last year, BCFSA is collecting residential real estate data and data on the use of the home buyer's rescission period.
And continuing with the basics, can you remind us who needs to respond to the data call?
Yes, sure. So all trading services brokerages must respond to both IRIS service requests. This includes brokerages with no transactions or rescissions to report, as well as brokerages whose transactions are exempt under the GVR Information Sharing Partnership.
Okay, so now that I know who needs to respond, for the residential real estate sales part of the data call, what transactions do I need to report?
Great. Let me walk you through exactly what needs to be reported. So you need to report all transactions where your brokerage was the listing brokerage and the sale was for a residential property and the firm date falls between February 15th, 2026 and March 14th, 2026. You do not need to report transactions where your brokerage only provided services to the buyer with firm dates before February 15th or after March 14th, 2026, of pre-sale units subject to disclosures under the Real Estate Development and Marketing Act, involving unrepresented sellers, of assignments of the contract of purchase and sale, regardless of whether you represented the assigner or the assignee, and involving commercial or industrial real estate. So for example, sales involving primarily commercial or industrial properties. As mentioned earlier, brokerages that are members of the GVR board are exempt from reporting transactions within the GVR board region due to the information sharing partnership between BCFSA and GVR. We will speak to this more shortly in another FAQ.
And when you were talking about what transaction data needed to be reported, you used the term residential property. What does residential property include?
Great question, Emily. Residential property refers to existing and newly built dwellings, including detached houses, semi-detached houses, for example, duplexes, townhomes, apartments with a duplex or other multi-unit dwellings, a residential strata lot such as a condo, manufactured homes that are fixed to land, and a cooperative interest that includes a right of use or occupation of a dwelling. This does not include property that is on leasehold or the sale of property where the Real Estate Development and Marketing Act applies. For example, pre-sales are not included within the definition of residential property for the data call.
That's great. And again, when you were speaking about what transactions need to be reported, you also used the term firm date. Can you tell us, what does firm date mean?
Great question, Emily, and this is one we get often. So the firm date for a subject-free or unconditional offer means the date that the rescission period expired. And for a conditional offer, the firm date is the date when the buyer and/or the seller removed all subjects and the rescission period has passed. Also, please remember that the firm date must be between February 15th, 2026 and March 14th, 2026.
Let's talk a little bit more about the information sharing partnership with GVR. We spoke to this during the presentation, and you also referenced it in one of your earlier answers. Why are GVR members exempt from submitting residential real estate transaction data this year?
Good question, Emily. Brokerages that are members of the GVR board and their managing brokers are exempt from providing residential real estate transaction data for transactions involving property located within the geographical area served by the GVR board. This exemption is in place because of an information sharing partnership between BCFSA and GVR. Through this partnership, BCFSA receives direct access to residential real estate transaction data occurring within the GVR area.
And speaking a little more about the exemption for GVR member brokerages, what is the GVR board area?
Good question. The GVR board area includes all of the areas listed on this slide. If you're still unsure, GVR has a very helpful resource on their website where you can search the GVR board area.
Okay, so as a GVR member brokerage, can you help me understand what real estate transactions I need to report directly in light of the information sharing agreement?
For sure. So just right off the bat, Emily, as a GVR member brokerage, you still need to respond to the IRIS service requests. So let's walk through some options. As a GVR member brokerage, if all of your transactions in the reporting period are in the GVR board area, then as Chris showed earlier, you must respond to the IRIS service request by selecting all of my transactions are in the exempted region. Now, if you have transactions within the reporting period that are outside of the GVR board area, then as Chris demonstrated earlier, you must respond to the IRIS service request by submitting these transactions in a workbook in IRIS. Now, if you have no transactions to report during the reporting period, then you must respond to the IRIS service request by selecting the No Transactions to Report option. I hope that's helpful, Emily.
And you mentioned that GVR members are exempt from reporting some residential real estate sales data, but there are two parts to the data call, sales and rescissions. Are GVR members exempt from reporting rescission data too?
The answer is no, Emily. All brokerages, regardless of being members of the GVR board and their managing brokers, are still required to report data on the use of the HBRP for the 2025 calendar year. If the brokerage does not have any relevant information to provide, the brokerage/managing brokers must make a nil submission reporting no rescissions in the IRIS portal as per the detailed instructions.
Anu, I'm sure that managing brokers who are not GVR members are wondering, why is GVR the only board being engaged in an information sharing partnership? And will brokerages that are members of other boards receive the same opportunity in the future?
Good question, Emily. BCFSA has been exploring opportunities to gain direct access to real estate boards data for some time now. GVR approached BCFSA with a proposal for an information sharing agreement, which led to the agreement currently in place. While GVR is the first board to participate, BCFSA remains interested in exploring agreements with other boards. BCFSA will continue to actively engage with other boards and with the BCREA to explore opportunities for similar agreements in the future.
What data will BCFSA receive access to through its agreement with GVR?
BCFSA will receive residential real estate transaction data for all properties listed and sold within the GVR board area. This includes many of the same fields collected in previous data calls, such as property type, sale price, and transaction date, as well as commission information.
Are there differences in the data that BCFSA will receive through its partnership with GVR compared to what's being reported through the data call and the Excel workbook? For example, I'm aware that some of the fields in the workbook are not necessarily collected in MLS.
Yes, so while much of the information gathered from GVR will be the same as the data call, there are some differences. So the GVR data will not include offer data, so total number of offers received and the highest declined offer price. We won't also be getting offer conditions, property disclosure statement, and listing brokerage and gross brokerage commission information.
So finally, just wrapping up our discussion about the information sharing partnership with GVR, how is BCFSA benefiting from the agreement and access to the data?
Good question, Emily. So direct access to GVR transaction data allows BCFSA to gain timely, comprehensive access to residential real estate transaction data within the GVR board area. It allows us to strengthen compliance and enforcement activities, including understanding transaction volumes and business practices to support audits and investigations. And it also enhances policy development by enabling BCFSA to monitor rule changes, identify emerging trends, and assess consumer risk in real time.
Okay, enough about GVR. Let's get back to the data call more generally. For brokerages who need to report transactions using the workbook, wherever those transactions may be located, how can they access the workbook? Where can they find it?
So for ease of access, you can either download the workbooks from our website or directly from the service requests that'll be sent to you in Iris. Just a reminder, there are two workbooks. So there's one for residential real estate sales, and there's one for the use of the home buyer's rescission period.
Thanks, Anu. Many brokerages have more than one branch office. As a managing broker at a brokerage with multiple branch offices, do I need to report transactions for branch offices too?
Question comes up quite a bit, Emily. So managing brokers of brokerages are responsible for submitting transaction information for all corresponding branch offices, which must be included within the brokerage head office data in a single submitted workbook.
Okay, now that I have the workbook, can I submit multiple workbooks to the same service request? For example, could I ask each branch office to complete a workbook and then upload all of them?
Another great question. The answer, no. If you are a managing broker responsible for reporting transactions for multiple brokerages, including branch offices, you must report all transactions in one consolidated workbook.
Not all brokerages have data to report. It's possible, particularly in a slower market, like the one we're currently experiencing in many areas of BC, that a brokerage will not have any sales during the reporting period or had not received any rescission notices last year. What, if anything, do managing brokers need to do in this situation?
Okay, as noted earlier, a response to both service requests is required in all cases. So in this particular case, if you have no transactions or rescissions to report, you must still make a nil submission via your service request in Iris. If you need more helpful tips on how to do this, you can also look at our detailed instructions available on our website.
Now that I've filled out my submission, when is it due?
Great question. So a very important one, Emily. Your submissions, including any nil responses, are due on or before April 17th, 2026. As noted earlier, BCFSA will be following this deadline closely, and we will not accommodate any late submissions.
We all know that managing brokers are very busy these days. What will happen if they don't respond to one or both service requests?
Your response to the data call is mandatory. Non-compliance may result in an administrative penalty or other enforcement action, so we really strongly encourage you to set aside some time to complete your submission. You'll also note this year you have until April 17th, 2026 to make your submission.
We all know that mistakes can happen. If there's a mistake in my submission, can I resubmit the workbook?
Great. Mistakes happen to the best of us. So yes, if you need to resubmit, please contact support@bcfsa.ca. We recognize that this is a different contact point that we have pointed you to throughout this presentation. For this specific situation, however, where a submission has been filed and needs to be changed, BCFSA's support team will need to delete the previous submission and generate a new service request. So it's best to directly connect with support@bcfsa.ca for this specific instance.
Anu, where can managing brokers go if they have unanswered questions about the data call?
For any data call related inquiries, please connect with our service center team, either via email directly at datacall@bcfsa.ca, or you can call them at either 604-660-3555 or toll free at 1-866-206-3030. The service center will gladly answer your questions or route you to a subject matter expert such as a PSA, the member of the policy team, or an IMI team member.
Finally, last question. The data call workbook uses Microsoft Excel, but there's lots of people out there using other spreadsheet software like Numbers for Mac or Google Sheets. Is the data call compatible with other spreadsheet software programs? Could I, for example, fill out the workbook and submit it in one of these other file formats?
Yes, any of these systems should be compatible as long as you remember to save the file in .xlsx format. Only Excel files, that is those saved in this particular format, will pass the validation.
Great. Thanks again, Anu. I hope that makes things clearer for everybody. This brings us to the end of the question and answer portion of today's session. Before we close off, I want to remind you of the many ways that BCFSA provides ongoing communication and support to licensees. For regulatory guidance and resources, check out the knowledge base on BCFSA's website. If you need help with IRIS, you can find resources on the IRIS webpage. We also have a newsletter for all licensees called the Real Estate Bulletin. Plus, there's the monthly broker's brief specifically for managing and associate brokers. And don't forget, our service center is available to provide support via email or phone. Next slide. And with that, we've reached the end of the webinar. We will be sending out a short evaluation survey after the webinar. It would be great if you could take a few minutes to fill it out. We really appreciate your feedback on today's session, and thanks to everybody that hung on to the end. Thank you all for attending today.